to me, listening to someone who's singing from their heart and from their body rather than
Mm,
their head.
mm,
It's the same as when you're listening to a speaker. If they're
mm,
speaking from their head, it's
mm,
almost like they're reading a text and it gets boring. Whereas if they're speaking authentically and from a place where they know,
mm.
then it's going to be much more compelling and interesting to listen to.
Hello, and welcome to Your Free Voice with me, your host, Julia Norton. This podcast is for people who use their voice professionally or for fun, and they want to understand how it works a bit better, or to get over old stories that might be holding them back. Whatever level you're playing at right now, my goal is to bring you lots of actionable stuff, from the technical to the creative to the deeply woo, to help you free your voice. Episode 42 with the singer-songwriter, community choir leader and retreat facilitator Chris MacLean.
Chris MacLean is an award-winning singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, registered voice movement therapy practitioner, community choir leader, and circle singing facilitator. Her career spans over 40 years of composing and performing folk roots, world jazz, and Americana music, and has taken her across the globe. Chris believes that it's everyone's birthright to sing. She's a strong advocate of singing with the whole body, of embodying the voice. She leads the non-auditioned Song Kitchen Community Choir in Ottawa and Wakefield, teaching in the oral tradition, i.e. without sheet music. And each weekly session includes movement and voice warm-up, and songs in 2, 3, and 4-part harmony. She has 3 recordings of original compositions and is featured in several others. Along with being a dynamic solo performer, Chris currently performs in the acoustic trio Pargan Dames, based in Wakefield, and the folk roots duo Bray and MacLean with Don Bray. Chris, I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. Really, really thrilled. So
Wonderful.
welcome all the way from Quebec. Yes?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant. So what got you into singing in the first place? Because I know that we met through voice movement therapy, but that wasn't the beginning for you, right? So were you always a singer as a child and a musical family? What went on there?
I wouldn't say my family was particularly musical, but we always had music in the house.
Mm.
And my grandfather sang in the church choir. I sang at my grandfather's wedding when I was 7. That was
Wow.
my first performance.
Hmm.
I was wearing a light blue smocked dress, pigtails, and I sang "Where Have All the Flowers Gone," which is not a wedding song. But,
Wow.
by then I was already into folk music, even though my
Yeah.
parents listened mostly to classical.
Right.
I have 2 older siblings, and my sister used to bring home jazz and rock and roll and Joni Mitchell and all the folk
Yeah.
singers. So, I learned that way. My sister and I used to sing a lot together.
Yeah.
And then when I was about 12, um, I come from a small town in Ontario, and there's a university there. And
Mm.
one of my camp counselors came to university,
Mm.
and she contacted me, and I started hanging around with her.
Mm.
She was quite a bit older than I am.
Mm.
And her boyfriend was this guy named Nigel Russell, and he played in a duo with Stan Rogers, who later went on to become one of Canada's most famous and revered songwriters.
Okay.
So from about the age of 12, I was hanging out with these pretty powerful musicians, and they ran the university pub. So I got to go to all these shows, and met people like Tom Russell and Jerry Jeff Walker and Bruce Coburn and whoever was doing the folk circuit at that time. And
Yeah.
that's how I kind of caught the bug for writing songs and
Mm.
being a folkie.
So you got straight kind of into, because I know I've talked to a lot of singers who spend decades singing other people's songs before they even get the courage to write their own songs. But you kind of just got right into it.
I did, yeah. I started
Mm.
writing songs right away, and then I didn't. You know, I left home really young. I got married really young. Had my first child when I was 22, and just became a mom.
Mm.
And it wasn't really until, like, I played in a bluegrass band with my then husband until the second child was born, and it got to be a little too hard to play bars, you know, and come home to infants and toddlers. So, um, so I didn't play for quite a while. And then when I got divorced around 37, 38, that's when I picked it up again. And that's really when my music career started.
Is that when you started touring and things and doing more
Yeah.
shows? Right.
And I was part of a world music group for 10 years. We toured all over the place. And then in 2012, I helped a friend of mine facilitate a meditation retreat in Assisi, Italy. And I was the resident musician, and I wrote a song. And this woman is a psychiatrist, and she was the one who told me about voice movement therapy. And because I was I struggled to earn a living all those years, you know,
Sure.
as a musician. So any skill that I thought might help me earn a living, I was willing to tackle. So that's what took me into voice movement therapy.
How interesting. And how it feels like there was I mean, how did you meet this woman that how did you meet this woman that took you to Italy on a meditation retreat? I mean, that feels like, because doesn't it sometimes feel like the universe just kind of drops people
Totally.
into your way, you
Yeah.
know?
Oh, completely. Like, I met that woman when I lived in a small village outside of Ottawa when my kids were quite young. And I was I went through a major illness, and she, being a doctor, used to come and visit me when I was in the hospital. And that's when I really got to know her. And she would come and visit me when she was finished doing rounds. And at that time, I've always been the kind of person who wants information. So I wanted to know what was going on in my body. So she gave me that information. She showed me the medical books, and that's when we became friends. And then it was, you know, probably 10 years later, or 8 years later, that she invited me to go to Italy with her. She was running her first mindful meditation retreat, and she wanted somebody to go to, like, do all the running around for her.
How did that, because I know you run retreats now and have done for a few years. Was that first one, were you like, whoa, you can actually do this? People will actually, was that the taste? Yeah.
And then what also, I've studied quite a bit with Rhiannon, and Rhiannon is she's really a jazz singer from San Francisco, originally the Bay Area. She now lives in Hawaii, and she runs these amazing courses called All the Way In, which is a vocal improvisation intensive. And but she also runs shorter workshops all over the place, and she goes all over the world, and she sings with Bobby McFerrin, and that I think she was part of Voice Estra with him, and she still sings with him and with some of the other people that collaborate with him. So I learned a lot from Rhiannon, just the way she presents her courses. And in some ways, I designed my retreat a little bit following, it's very different music that we're doing, sort of just the pace of the retreat was what she does.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, doesn't it? Because, like, you know, if you haven't done a thing before, like, why reinvent the wheel if there's somebody who's really good at it and presents it? Like, just framework can be really helpful. So, but before we get into the retreat thing, so you went straight kind of into singing in this informal kind of pub university pub type vibe initially, and then out into more gigs. Did you ever suffer from stage fright, performance anxiety, or any kind of sense of feeling like an imposter? Like, did that ever come up for you? Because I know a lot of my listeners struggle with that type of thing.
I would say yes, 200%. I mostly don't now, but you know, I'm 67. I've been performing a lot since I was 37, so 30 years. And then before that,
Yeah.
10 years as well. That was one of the things that voice movement therapy really, really helped me with.
Right.
Just the idea of taking my own space,
Yeah.
you know, breathing into my roots.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because in all of the voice study I've done, that includes the work with Rhiannon. I work with a voice coach as well still. Even the choir leadership training I did, all of the training I've done, every single teacher has given me the same information about, you know, planting your feet, really feeling the earth underneath you, and relaxing into that strength that we're all standing on. And then, you know, just the voice movement therapy really helped me because you know, in voice movement therapy, you make all kinds of sounds, you know, you make all kinds of ugly sounds and lots of nasal stuff. And, you know, so making all of that spectrum of sound in front of other people and actually writing some of it into some of my songs, that and not getting booed, you know, by anyone for it.
Right. I think that was one of the biggest takeaways for me in voice movement therapy, was arriving there with this kind of crystalline folk singer voice with all the polished ornaments, and I was so precise about the whole thing, and everything had to be perfect, you know. And if I tripped over an ornament in a performance, I was devastated, you know. And then going into, you know, being able to use a full range of your voice through calling and into a high belt and making all the crispy, crunchy, scratchy, nasally, all those noises, and being so I think that's a lovely point. And we can make our funnel way too tight. Right? We can put so much pressure and expectation on our voice that it becomes this little kind of strangled tube. Even if the voice still sounds fairly free and we're doing a thing, what if your potential is so much more than that, right? And you don't know until you've tried it.
And really, just like in the work I'm doing these days with my voice coach, she's a wonderful, wonderful voice coach in Ottawa. You know, the idea, and I've listened to it in other singers. Like, I don't like listening to a voice that sounds like it's so controlled and perfect, that it
Polished.
lacks any emotion or like I would much rather listen to somebody who's telling the story from their heart.
That's right.
So when you're telling the story from your heart, it's not necessarily going to be perfectly delivered.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
you know, emotion can take
That's
you.
right.
And yet that's, to me, listening to someone who's singing from their heart and from their body rather than their head. It's the same as when you're listening to a speaker. If they're speaking from their head, it's almost like they're reading a text.
Yeah, that's right.
And it gets boring. Whereas if they're speaking authentically and you know, from a place where they know, then it's going to be much more compelling and interesting to listen to.
That's so right. And that's definitely what I've been talking to my clients about for the last 25 years is that very thing. I would say, Billie Holiday had what, a 1-octave range, just over a 1-octave range, like very little range at all, very little.
Wow. I
But
didn't even know that.
wow, the
Yes.
emotion,
Yeah.
right? The storytelling. And it really is, a huge part of it is to give yourself permission to ground, connect with your heart, and tell the story. And I think if you can do those things, then you're really, really on your way.
Yeah.
How much? Because I know, certainly in my work, I work a lot with people's shadow material in terms of, yes, the dark and sticky and tricky stuff, but also the treasures that we've buried because they weren't appropriate. It wasn't appropriate in your culture or your family to take space or to speak up or to be creative. You're supposed to be a nurse or a scientist or something like that. Do you find that the people that come to your retreats or even your community choirs are people who are just discovering and letting this side of themselves come out a little bit more?
Absolutely. And I would say at least half the people that come to community choir approach me and say, I'm not a very good singer, or I haven't sung in years. I'm nervous. I don't want to wreck it for everybody. I don't think I'm good enough. Like, I would say at least half the people that come with that in mind. And my job as a community choir leader is to erase as much of that negative chatter as possible and build that atmosphere of, we aren't here to win the Kiwanis Music Festival award. We are here to sing and enjoy singing together. And so many people get told when they're really young, oh, just mouth the words, and it's, to me it's a wound that a lot of people carry around all life.
Yeah.
And it makes them feel like they don't belong. So my job as a community choir leader is to create an environment where everybody belongs.
Yeah, I love that.
We all do. We all do. We all belong right where we are because we were born. That's the only prerequisite, really.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Beautifully put, Chris. And you have to tell me why your choir is called the Song Kitchen Choir. Is that because everybody just sings in the kitchen?
it started, when I did this fantastic community choir leadership training in Victoria, British Columbia in 2015, and it's still running. The training runs every year, and it's really a very, very good training. And while part of that training process, we had to start thinking about, naming our choir and marketing it. And so I just thought, well, I had started something in my home, and I used to have Sunday afternoon gatherings in my home, which is a very small home, and I'd make chai and muffins and, just have people over. And so it felt like, I want to create this choir, which is where we all get together and cook up something delicious and fun, and we have a good time. I like getting together with people to cook and drink wine and sing and, just have friends. So that's basically the only reason I called it the Song Kitchen Choir is we're cooking up a bunch of songs in the kitchen, and it's not for performance. It's it's just for the enjoyment.
I love that. And I think there's so many people, because I ran community choirs in London and in San Francisco when I first moved here. And we were talking about this recently because some clients of mine have been like, why aren't you running a choir? And I was like, because it's so much work, right? It's so much work actually to do that. And at the moment, I don't feel like I have the time. But the energy of having 30 or 40 people, maybe your choirs are bigger as well. Mine was only ever like 40, I think, at the max in London. Having those people singing your 3 parts that you've taught them all by ear, and just, you know, I mean, I had people get married out of my choirs, and
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
what could you say to anybody listening who might be kind of really like just wanting to sing in a choir, but like you said, too nervous that they're going to go and ruin it for everybody else, or, you know, like, can you describe, because I could sit and describe the feeling I have of being in the room, but how about you? What would you say that they would probably experience?
Well, a lot of people in my choir have said it's transformative.
Mhm.
You know, I was at an 80th birthday party the other night that my trio, the Dames, we performed at, and the woman whose birthday it was is in my choir in Wakefield, and there were a lot of people from my choir at the birthday party, and they met Ilza at choir, and
Mm.
um and then the people that come on my retreat, they're mostly people from my choir, not everybody, but
Mm.
it's people have made friends
Mm.
with their other choir members, and so there is this sense of camaraderie. We're all in the boat together.
Mhm.
We laugh a lot. I will tell them when it sounds terrible, and we'll laugh about it.
Yeah,
You
right,
know,
exactly.
I mean, why not?
Yes,
It's kind of like being part of a dragon boat team. You know, it's not
right.
always like we're in the boat together. We're doing something collectively, and in that process, people and the thing about singing is, you know, it's vulnerable. People are vulnerable when they're singing.
Mm.
And it's not for everybody singing in a non-auditioned community choir, because there are definitely people who come to choir who are both pitch and rhythm challenged.
Mm, mm, mm.
And there are people that have come, you know, for 1 or 2 and have left because they can't stand the fact that not everyone's singing on pitch all the time or
Mm, mm,
in
mm.
rhythm. And I'm like, you know what? It's a process. We do it for 8 weeks, and by the end of the 8 weeks, we're all singing really well together. But at the
Yeah.
beginning, no, it might not sound that great. So it's same as like being a soccer team. You know, at the
Yeah,
beginning,
yeah, yeah.
you're not very good as a team, and by the end of the season, you're great because you build these skills and you build that sense of trust with each other. The vulnerability is allowed. You know,
Mhm.
people take off their armor,
Yes.
and the armor comes off and the voice gets better.
Right, because people can hear themselves when they stop clenching and stop, you know, when the fear lessens, you're able to actually hear.
And we do
Right.
lots of stuff around
Yeah.
like, let's learn to listen
Mm,
and listen to each other
mm,
and listen to the other people singing our part. We do
mm.
this thing I call a mashup, where we get something going in 3 parts. And then I tell everybody, okay, now you're just going to walk off by yourself. So you're leaving the security of the other people in your part,
Yes.
going off singing that part by yourself. And yeah, it's
I love that, Chris. Actually, it's different to what I do. So you have people are singing their parts, and then they're threading through like snakes, like separating it, which I think is actually really lovely. One of the things, I don't know whether you do this too. Um, one of the things I do is you steal somebody else's part. So once everybody's got their part, then I do the like firing off fireworks sign. And but you have to keep singing your part until you've stolen somebody else's. This is in the improv
oh
circles and things I do.
yeah.
So, and then once you steal somebody else's, but usually what happens, depending on the experience of the people, is we pretty quickly get down to like, if we started off with 7 different fragments of an improv circle, we'll end up with 2 really pretty quickly. So you have to kind of build it. But that is also that talk about keen listening, like
Yes.
really listening for somebody else's while you're, but I love yours because it's a much gentler transition into that separation and
Exactly.
still listening. Yeah. I
Yeah,
love
I
that.
think that I would say the majority of people that I have in my choir
Yeah.
are not confident enough to do
Yeah.
improv on their own. So when we do circle singing, that's all
Yeah.
improvised. But typically I will set the parts. I'm trying to get it so that a few of the more confident singers, I'll say, okay, why don't you try,
Yeah.
Or more likely, I'll build the sort of the band singing different parts, and then I'll get people to go into the middle and solo
Oh, yeah, lovely.
with the bands,
Yeah. Yeah.
singing.
And you said also about your choir is an 8-week process, so it's not an ongoing weekly thing through the
It's
year.
Well, I have different, like right now it's 8 weeks.
Mhm.
When I started out, it was 12.
Mm.
It just depends. Like for me, I'm just trying to also pace myself as I get
Yeah.
older. Typically, like I work up all the songs before I start a session,
Yeah.
and I record all the parts.
Yeah.
And so I think I would be exhausted if I did an ongoing thing. And
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons I take a break of 2 weeks in between
Yeah.
sessions,
Yeah.
is so that I can rest and record some new songs.
Yeah.
This year I had some stuff happen, so I just decided, you know what, I've been doing this now for 9 years, so I'm going to go back and go over the songs that I did 8 or 9 years ago or 7 years ago, and maybe reuse some of them.
I
So I
can't
have
believe
all
it's
these
taken you
recordings.
this long to do that.
Yeah, I have like, I don't know, something like 300 songs
You are
recorded.
prolific.
Well, some of them are really short,
Yeah.
but
And how many of those have you written, or are they all ones that you've gathered from other places?
they're mostly ones I've gathered from other places. We've done a
Yeah.
few of my songs, but I would say maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The rest are, I'm part of the Ubuntu Choir Network. So um, we there was actually just a choir reunion this last weekend on Zoom.
Right.
I didn't go because I was too busy, but oftentimes I will go either
What
physically
is
or
the
on.
Ubuntu choir? Is that what you trained in? What you was the
Yes,
leadership you were talking about?
yeah.
Yeah. Right.
And at the choir reunions, it's all about, like, we have sessions on various topics, but a lot of what we do is swap songs, teach each other songs. So
Great.
I'll come home from a reunion with 40 new songs.
Oh, that's amazing. What a resource.
Yeah.
And I love that how especially in the community choir world, people are so supportive of each other. And like that, because right, that your choir needs songs always. So there's a constant need to kind of find those, and usually songs that people might recognize often in a simpler 3-part harmony than you might, so
Yeah.
so it's actually quite specific what you're looking for with a non-audition choir as well.
Before I took the choir leadership training, I think I was probably in the church choir when I was 8, but that was the only choir I'd ever been in. I didn't really want to be in a choir. I thought
Yeah.
choirs were all a bit prissy and, uptight. I didn't want to sing church music.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a lot of experience with the other choirs that are
Right.
around. But I went to do the choir leadership training because I was doing a gig and somebody came up and said, "You'd make a really good choir leader. You should take this training." And
Amazing.
I was still struggling to make a living, so I was looking
Yeah.
for more tools, and
Yeah.
I took that training, and man, that really turned my life around.
So actually that makes me want to ask you a question that and that's about, because I know there are plenty of singer-songwriters or want to be singer-songwriters that listen as well. And And we all carry this, you'll never make a living as a musician story, right?
Yeah.
And there are elements of that that are very, very, very challenging. But do you have words of encouragement for somebody, a young person who really wants to write their own songs, but their parents have just told them you'll never make a living doing that?
Yeah, I do have words of encouragement. First of all, it goes right into my core values of why we're here on the planet. You know, and we're like, humans are super creative, and we barely scratch the surface of our potential. So I think anybody who has that urge, that calling, go for it and figure it out how you're going to do it. Some people I know have just done with less. You know, they live in small apartments and write songs, but to me, I think I did not get that kind of encouragement. So I always had one foot in and one foot out. And I think I would have been a lot better off if I'd had both feet in all along.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I would be further ahead, you know. And I have crafted a life that I love. And I feel like my tribe are people all over the world. I have friends all over the world who are musicians and singers and doing something to do with the voice. And so I feel extremely fortunate. I've built a house. You know, I don't have a lot of debt. I live frugally. And I just, if I could do it, anybody could, because I had this, like I said, one foot in, one foot out all the time. So I was kind of always rolling with the brakes on, and I still managed to do it. And if you just don't have the brakes on, I would say that your chances are higher that you'll figure out a way, you know.
Yeah.
At least don't stop doing what you love. If you
Yeah.
have to do a day job, do a day job. Don't stop doing what you love.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And here's another question I've found as I've gone through, because I, like you, a little bit kind of was operating with the brakes on a lot through my life, and partly this performance anxiety held me back a lot, and just feeling like I was underqualified and imposter syndrome all over the place, right? So when I had actually just moved to San Francisco after qualifying from voice therapy in 2000, and was doing jazz gigs and just got my feet under me, right? Like everything was, I had a regular gig in San Francisco, and I wasn't scared anymore, everything. And I was singing with a crazy kind of, it was a fringe theater company, a gay cabaret type weird thing. I don't know quite how I just answered a Craigslist ad. I think that's how I got into that. But everything was going, and then I had my son, and we moved out of the city, and I got kind of isolated. I didn't know anybody else with babies, and so I started holding lullaby groups for moms and babies, because I thought, I don't know any lullabies. Do I know any lullabies? You know. And so I started gathering women in the house with their babies to sing. And then when my son was in school, I was teaching elementary school kids how to write, well, fifth graders, how to write their own operas through the San Francisco Opera, you know. And so like, as my life has gone, like singing has fit into the moments in my life. And like right now, I feel like I'm really focused on people in midlife really fully embracing their full selves. Let's just throw off all the shackles of anything we thought we were supposed to do and follow the dream, like right now, right? So I feel like I'm really in this kind of midlife blossoming, right? And that's who I'm working with a lot. So I know that you also talked about your vocal kind of explorations tying in with stages in your life. And you'd said that you were also really interested in working with people at the end of life stuff, which I think is really fascinating to me too, having been at the lullaby end and in the birthing room end as well. So what draws you to that, and how does that, well, tell me a little bit about that.
Um, I am drawn to that, I would say, because I'm afraid of dying.
Fair.
And, I don't think I'm unusual in that. I'm less afraid of dying now than I used to be, but I think in part, when I was 33, I was hit with a life-threatening illness, and I did feel that I was possibly going to die. And coming out of that, I realized how terrified I had been and still was. So, in some ways, I'm drawn towards people at the end of their life because I want to be familiar with that and not to be as afraid. I don't know why else. I just am drawn to people at the end of their life because I feel there are a lot of people who are afraid to confront death, and people get isolated at that time in their life because maybe sometimes the people around them are afraid to confront what they're going through, like in a real way, to talk about it, to ask about whether there's any regret or anything they want to change or So I don't know, I'm fascinated with that stage of life. And I think we live in a death phobic culture, and we have lost connection with so many things, really, but we have lost connection with the natural cycle of life. That the natural cycle of life is no one gets out of here alive. So we are all headed to the same station. And I've run into a lot of people who are absolutely terrified and don't even want to talk about it. And then when I had a friend who died around Christmas time, and I went to see her, and her family who were there appreciated the fact that I was able to talk to her straight about, like, she's only given days or weeks to live, and I'm able to say, oh, okay, so what do you want to do in those last days? And just talk about, where she's at and not avoid the elephant in the room. And I think there's a growing movement of people who are realizing, like, we need to deal with this. People so isolated at the end of their life if their family and friends don't know how to deal with it.
Right. I think that's so true. So what you're talking about is being able to just be there and have open, real conversations with people. Let's not skirt around. Let's talk about forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, right? Even.
And also and then, typically what'll happen is I'll just go in with my guitar, say to someone's hospital room, and say, I've got a few songs for you. And sometimes that's all it is I just go in and play. And I know when my mom was dying, it'll be 10 years this year. And she was in a palliative care hospital, and I took my guitar in to sing to her, particularly in the last few days. And, my mom was unconscious, but I felt, I'm certain that she heard my singing and felt comforted by it, partly because it was familiar to her. But the nurses, I remember at one point the nurse coming in, and I said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm being too loud? Am I disrupting and she said, no, actually, the energy on the whole ward has shifted. We wish more people would do this.
Ah.
And there was actually one man who had a terrible disfiguring disease on his face, was like falling off, and he came and stood in the doorway while I was singing. And he never said anything. He just stood there listening. And I remember that and thought, okay, this is something I need to do.
Yeah.
This is a good thing. Just, and not like, my music is very mellow. I'm not, heavy rock and roller or anything. Some of my stuff is,
You're not belting. You're not doing it.
Not necessarily belting. Yeah. I have a few songs that or my inner rock child comes out, but
most you choose to not do those. Yeah. That's beautiful, Chris. And it's funny actually, because I've been toying with the idea, because I know that we have a colleague in who works with threshold choirs, and that way of getting into hospice care and places like that, and singing for people kind of in their last moments, and I don't know whether that is happening for people that don't have family or whatever, or if it's just, but it is a beautiful transition. And I was folding laundry last night and listening to random Pema Chodron videos on YouTube, and it happened to be the one where she says it's her 80th birthday and she wants to talk about death. I don't know if you've heard. And what I'm taking from what you were just saying and what I was listening to last night was this idea of, actually, it's about being able to relax into it.
Yeah. And
not clench with fear. And if we can relax into it, then that's kind of that's where the work is trying to find that. And I think that's probably what your music does, or these threshold singers, is the ability to soften.
Yeah. I mean, it just popped into my head. It would be as if every fall we went through this terror of winter's coming.
And as if by some divine intervention, at that moment of our podcast interview, we got thrown off Zoom and kicked out somehow. I think I ran out of space. So in that beautiful, poignant moment. And then we had the scramble of setting up another meeting and picking up. So there's going to be a little transition now as we head into talking about Chris's fabulous retreats that she runs in Mexico. So here we go, transition time.
The first retreat you went to was this one in Italy. You have this beautiful community of singers that come to your choirs. And you also did your Rhiannon training and the Ubuntu choir leadership, but many things that informed how you could host your own retreats. How long have you been running retreats now?
My first one was in 2020, just before the lockdown. And then I did another one last November. And so this one will be my third.
So tell us about the one you've got coming up.
So this one, it starts the 30th of November and runs to the 7th of December for a week in Puerto Morelos, Mexico, which is only about 45 minutes to an hour outside of Cancun. But personally, I like it better than Cancun because it's not as rah.
Yeah.
It's a former fishing village. And we rent a little villa. We have our own studio, 2 floors of rooms around a pool, a separate building for the studio. And some people stay offsite because we don't have enough room in the villa for everybody. But we do a daily program. There's one day in the week when we take people out on a tour, which is optional. So it's either a day off or it's come on this tour to visit the cenotes. The rest of the time we have a program that starts every day at around 10, goes till say around 1, then everyone gets the afternoon, the hot hours off, back at around 4, go till supper. and once or twice we might sing in the evening, but most of the time it's these hours during the day with the break in the hottest hours.
Yeah.
And we start every day with some voice movement. We do some sort of community building exercises. We sing, we learn some songs. I always incorporate a few songs in Spanish because we're in Mexico. So we learn some songs as a choir, some circle singing. And so I just sort of throw everything that I love into the mix. So it's a little bit more of the sort of outside the lines coming to regular choir, but because we do some stuff that is more voice movement therapy, and then we have lots of free time. People go to the beach every morning. We'll have a yoga teacher coming in if people want to take a yoga class.
How many people do you have on these retreats? What's your kind of maximum capacity?
Around 20.
And how do people find out about your wonderful retreat?
My website, chrismaclean.com.
When you spell out MacLean, and I'll put a link in the show notes too, but yeah, say it again.
So CHRIS, and my last name is MacLean.com. All one word.
Perfect. Lovely. And I will definitely put a link in the show notes too. And is there anything else I didn't ask you about, Chris, that you'd love to share with everybody today?
I think we pretty well covered everything. Maybe just a little more about circle singing.
Oh yeah, because we didn't really talk about circle singing very much. Yeah, so for anybody who hasn't heard of circle singing before, like, could you give us the Cliff Notes version of what that is and what your experience is of it, like what it gives you as a singer?
Yes, I love it. It's one of my happiest places, and it comes from taking workshops with Bobby McFerrin, who's kind of the godfather of circle singing. And basically what the leader of the circle does is, first of all, people stand in the circle according to where their voice range is. So we'll have lower, medium, high, higher, high singers. So everybody sort of takes a place in the circle according to where what their pitch range is. And then the person in the middle just sort of, as Bobby says, there's a million melodies floating around in the air. You just have to grab onto one. So I'll close my eyes and just allow the music to come through me, and I'll pick out of what I sing a pattern that is, a definite pattern that is repeatable. So it could be like doom 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 dum 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 doom 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 dum dum dum, and I'll give that pattern to a group of singers. And I'll just say, okay, I'm going to sing this. You just listen. I'll sing it a few times and then you repeat it. And we'll get that going, and then we'll go to a different group, or I'll go back into the middle and I'll come up with a part that sort of interlocks with that. And I'll assign that to a different group, and we go through the whole group and building basically a backup band for a song that is built of voices. And sometimes the parts are a bass part or a percussion part. We can have a circle sing that is all percussion, or all like bzz, 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 just sounds.
Yeah.
And then, sometimes someone will get in the middle and sing a solo over top of this backup band. And the idea is we're just spontaneously creating songs out of the ether. Nobody videos it. It's just for right now. It's
in that moment. Yeah.
Impermanent,
Yeah.
And just the joy of creating something impermanent in the moment for the sake of that. And And, almost always it turns out being something fantastic that you go, oh, damn, I wish I'd recorded that.
Yes, so true. So true. I've had voice actors do that at voiceover conferences, and because they've often never experienced that before, and with fabulous and hilarious results. Do you sometimes use? Because sometimes I don't know whether this comes from circle singing or some other little thing that I've feathered my nest with, but do you ever use like a lyric from a song or a song title as a lyric that everybody's doing the same lyric, but with a different rhythm or melody or
Oh, I haven't done
yeah,
actually that particular,
yeah.
but I have done, I've done it where we could maybe start singing a song like,
Mm,
what would you do if I sang out of key? Would you stand
right,
up and walk out on me? Well,
right.
we could start singing a song, and then from that song, I could develop parts. And then one of those parts might be, would you stand up and walk out on me? Or oftentimes as an improv, we could give a lyric to each group. Snow, 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 and somebody else could be singing like, it's falling down, it's falling down.
Yeah,
You build a whole room full of
yeah,
parts that have lyrics, but are very repetitive. And
yes,
yeah.
yes. I think I've only formally been to a few circle singing sessions, although it's something that I've known about or been exposed to for decades. It feels like probably from a workshop I've gone to or somewhere along the way. But for anybody who's local to me, which is in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, there is a Monday night session at the Freight and Salvage, which is Bobby McFerrin's group, but it's usually run, I think, by Dave Worm.
Yeah.
But yeah, check out the Freight and Salvage. And thank you for reminding us to talk about that, because it was definitely on my list here of things I wanted to talk to you about. But Chris, I'm going to let you go because I know you have a whole bunch of stuff to do. But thank you so much for coming on here, talking to us about community choirs, how to live as a singing songwriter, approaching death, and circle singing, all the things. I mean, so many different things. And it's always such a pleasure to talk to you and see your lovely face. So thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's always great to see and talk to you, Julia.
Oh, you're so welcome, my dear.
That was such an action-packed episode. There was so much going on in there, from, just how to journey through life as a singer, find your voice, find your community, threshold singers and end-of-life stuff, community choirs, how to get your training, how to find your people, running retreats, all the different things. So I'm going to put lots of links in the show notes for you to grab. I think Chris still has a couple of spaces left on her retreat, so check out her website, chrismaclean.com. And I'm going to throw down a link as well for my workshop next week here in Marin County if you're local to me. And otherwise, it's going to take you to the events page and you'll find out the next wonderful thing that's happening. So have a great week, whatever you're doing. Remember to sing, be kind to yourself, be kind to everybody else, and free your voice. See you next time. Bye.